Okay. Um, do you have an intro?
Welcome to Not Just Any Book Clubs episode where they celebrate cancel culture.
W- Sure. I guess that works.
It does, because we're keeping it and we're using it. And my name is Justin, who just came up with that intro.
Yeah, and I'm Pierce.
He did not come up with that intro. But
That's true.
but I read Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. And Pierce over here read something.
I read Steppenwolfe by Herman Hesse. This is because we haven't introduced it, but I guess it's in the title. Uh Artists in Exile month, or Authors in Exile week, you could say.
Yes. Because last week, we uploaded our episode on nostalgia, which you may want to watch, you may not want to watch. You probably don't want to watch it.
It's
But
probably a skippable episode of ours, to be honest.
to be honest, but it exists.
Yep.
But this episode, it could be our best episode yet. Who knows?
The funny thing about last week's episode is that um the people who do recognize what nostalgia is and are like, "Oh, I'm going to check that episode out," are going to hate it.
Yeah.
So, because our like, we do have some analysis, but it's not like deep. It's like something that I feel like people who know
Very
what
surface
nostalgia is
level. Yeah.
probably have noticed too. Anyways, on to
On
this
this episode.
episode.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, this episode is about artists, specifically authors here, that have been exiled from their home country, whether it's by self-exile or by the law, because most of the time when they are exiled and when artists is exiled, it's probably for not the right reasons, especially if it's by the government, because they're like
Mhm.
censorship, or in the case of I was about to say Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde, indecency, which
Yeah.
again, probably not the best part of human history, intolerance, bigotry, great, not spectacular. Uh
If it's self-exile, it's usually because the government is doing something bad. If it is exile by the government, it's usually because the government is actively being bad and exiling them for something that's, we would consider morally wrong, morally unjust exiling. Most of the time.
yeah.
There
Ex
are there are certain exilees, Roman
mhm.
Polanski, who were exiled for good reason.
Yeah. Well,
But
he
but
wasn't.
but most of the time.
Yeah, well,
He
Polanski
was
wasn't
he
exiled by the government. He kind
yes,
of just ran
but
away.
but we're including personal exile in that.
Yes, we are.
So it does count. But yeah, so
Yay.
anyways, yeah, anyways, so most artists who are exiled for the wrong reasons. Most.
5 minutes of this episode, we bring up Polanski. Let's go.
Only
Yeah,
to say, only as a bad example of like
exception to the
counter to
rule.
what we're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I guess, do you wanna start? You wanna tell me about
W-
Oscar Wilde?
We should start off with your book because you also have read Oscar Wilde,
Hmm.
Picture of Dorian Gray, and we're gonna go into a bit of spoilers on that. So whenever that episode comes out, once we start talking about the Picture of Dorian Gray, because that book is honestly kind of impossible to talk without spoiling.
Well, so what I will say is that the concept in both of our books is kind of a spoiler, to be
Oh,
honest. I would say this one not as much as Picture of Dorian Gray, but it still is. So, um,
they're 100 years old.
Herman,
Yeah.
yeah. So Herman Hesse. If you don't know who he is, he's one of the most famous German authors. Um, he wrote, probably his most famous book is Siddhartha, which I've talked about in the podcast
We've
before.
both talked about it, yeah.
It's oh yeah, we did. And he is kind of well known for trying to figure out how an individual can kind of, I guess, become a better person, be authentic, be spiritual. Um, he really likes spirituality,
Hmm.
um, of all kinds, Eastern, Western. Um, so Siddhartha kind of reads like a young person finding themselves, and then they have found themselves, and then it's like kind of it takes a long time to get to that point. I guess finding yourself throughout your life, but you start with Siddhartha being a young person, right? I guess that's kind of the point that I'm making. Steppenwolfe is supposed to be more autobiographical. It's supposed to be his most autobiographical work because it's kind of a search on how to pull um how to teach an old dog new tricks,
Ooh,
basically.
I like that.
Harry Heller in the book is 50, or 55. He's in his 50s. Um, and so he's kind of living this life, and he's depressed, and he's got like a suicide date picked out, and like he's not doing super hot. And so I'll get more into the plot of that in a second, but just to circle back to Herman Hesse, um, he moved to Switzerland. I want to say in the early 1900s. He moved to Switzerland. Um, Maybe after. Oh, because he didn't want to serve in, or it was during the First World War. I really should have written this down more concisely. Um, he moved to Switzerland around the time of the First World War, and then he became a permanent resident. And I believe by 1920 he was a citizen of Switzerland. Um, and he continued to write and work there. And then we're gonna get to the exile. He saw the rise of the Nazis coming from outside of the
Oh,
of it, and he wrote about it. He was concerned about it. He wrote to people in Germany about it. He helped artists like Bertolt Brecht and Thomas Mann. He
oh,
helped them get out of Germany um, before everything was closed off, and there was no way. There would have been no way for them to get out. Um, he wrote a book, which is the next one I'm interested in reading after reading a little bit more about his life. He wrote a book, The Glass Bead Game. He wrote about it during kind of the rise of Nazism and through the last couple years of him writing novels. And that's kind of that's what he claims helped him get through that time because he was. I guess I guess I should put it like this: he seemed. It seems like he was kind of depressed seeing his country fall like that,
yeah.
his old home. Um, but he never outright what's the word condemned the Nazi Party, but in his writing and through things that he was saying to other people and through his mood, he definitely
Was
very
critical.
strongly
Yeah.
disapproved of them. Yeah, he criticized them. Um, and he went on to kind of actually help um, push up Jewish people. He did reviews and publications of famous Jewish authors, like the main one that people point to is Franz Kafka, of course, the
Your boy.
famous German speaking Jewish author. Um, and yeah, so that was kind of his personal exile. There's no way he was going home at that point,
Hmm.
or to his old home. Um, and he hated it. And eventually, they stopped publishing his work in Germany and completely banned it and everything. So there's some censorship going on. It seems I did not see that he was like ever officially exiled, but he also was never living in Germany, so it's possible they didn't feel the need to.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm sure if he ever went back and, like, the authorities found out, oh, Herman Hesse is here, then they would probably have taken him in because that's the kind of place Nazi Germany is. They clearly didn't like him or his ideas.
Yeah.
Sure. So, how much of it was personal exile? How much of it was that the Nazis would never have ever welcomed him back? I don't know. But
Probably a
he
little bit
was
of both.
definitely, yeah, probably a little bit of both. He was definitely not going home as long as the Nazis were in power. So, yeah, that's Herman Hesse. I heavily recommend the two books I've read by him, and we'll go ahead and get into Steppenwolfe. So it's kind of almost like the coming of age story developed in Germany. It's called a Bildungsroman in
Mhm.
German, it means development novel,
Mhm.
basically. Um, and so the reason I bring that up is because this isn't really a building roman. A building roman. It's not a coming of age story exactly, but it does have some of that feel a little bit. Um, Harry Heller is a lost, um, just like a lost old man, essentially.
Mm.
Am I getting his last name right? I think I am. But Harry is a lost old man. Basically, he has this suicide date picked out. He kind of like lives a very solitary life, um, and on purpose. And he is depressed that he enjoys like bourgeois attitudes and their kind of way of living because he has nostalgia for it, but he also seems to think that it's wrong to indulge like that.
Hmm.
Um, and so he is just going about living this like super solitary life. And it's constantly thrown in his face that he doesn't belong here. He calls himself a Steppenwolf, which is a wolf of the steppes. And eventually he's wandering around the city and he sees like there's a sign for a magic theater for madman only, and he tries to get in but he can't find the entrance. And then he's walking some more and he sees a guy with a sign that has an ad for it as well, this magic theater. And he's like, oh, how do I get in? And the guy takes out a pamphlet. um on that guy's sign it also says something like anarchist entertainment or something like that. And the guy takes out a pamphlet and he hands it to him, and it's the Steppenwolf, or treatise on the Steppenwolf. And it's a treatise that I'm pretty sure calls Harry's name out directly, like it's like written to him.
Oh, is it like a
um
translation thing, or is it just like actually written towards him?
no, I think it's actually written towards him, so it's
Okay.
very like this novel is very surreal. There are like dream sequences kind of with like famous Germans who Harry admires. Um, the last part of the book is just chock full of symbolism, I believe, because Harry is supposed to be on drugs, so
Oh.
it just goes crazy. Um, and he walks through these 5 doors that represent like 5 different aspects of his life. And it's just like it's very upfront about how symbolic it all is. Very surreal. But anyways, so he gets this treatise that seems to be written for him, and it kind of like lays out what a Steppenwolf is, how it's like half man, half wolf. It's a person who doesn't belong. Harry doesn't belong. Um, he has this like wild side, but also this like the side of man, the educated side. And when these two sides aren't fighting, the Steppenwolf is extremely happy. But when they are fighting, it like tears this person apart. Um, But it goes on towards the end of the treatise to basically ridicule Harry for thinking this, saying that it's ridiculous that that he is made up of 1,000 souls, not just two. That there are a million different aspects of him, not just those two. So it like relays exactly what he thinks and then tears that away. And he just by chance ends up meeting that guy again. There's also some other stuff that goes on. I'm skipping around to show further show that Harry does not belong in like society. Like he's not a proper member of society. And all this time, I think he's still planning on following his suicide date. But he meets up with that guy who handed him the pamphlet again, and when he presses for the location of the theater, he's given instead a dance hall.
Like an actual dance hall, like a ball.
I think it's kind of. I'm pretty sure there's a bar there. It feels a little seedy from what I remember. I read this in December and is now late February.
Okay.
I don't remember the exact details on what the dance hall looked like, but I remember he sent him to a dance hall. And it is here, I believe, where he meets a woman named Hermina. And Hermina,
I like to think that's a female version of Herman Hesse.
We'll get to it.
Okay. Okay.
So Hermina, she comes in and they talk, and she kind of like makes fun of him because he's self-pitying and he's sad and he but she agrees to meet him later, and he feels like she kind of like gives him life. He feels like if he's not going to commit suicide, then pursuing something with this woman is his ticket out. And so I believe they then go to dinner. And the second meeting, oh yeah, so the second meeting is like Harry, he postpones his suicide pretty much, and then the second meeting is where like their relationship really starts coming together. She introduces him to other people. She introduces him to a woman, Maria. She takes him to parties and introduces him to like drugs and all this like kind of frivolous indulgence that he hated before. She's like, and he meets this weird saxophonist named Pablo who doesn't really talk all that much, and he gets frustrated with him because he's trying to, engage in like meaningful, high-minded conversation about music with this saxophonist. And eventually he does get him to talk, and Pablo's basically like, "It's music, man. It's for the it's good for the soul. It's all for the pleasure of the listener." And Harry is very upset by this, but he can't argue because Harry thinks that there's this like higher music, that there's a spiritual thing with music. And anyways, so they later attend this big masquerade ball, and it's this huge scene where he's kind of dancing around with I think he dances with Maria for a little bit. He dances with some random woman who turns out to be Hermina, and they break apart. And eventually, they all kind of gather back together. I believe Hermina, Pablo, and Harry for the final part of the book, where we kind of. I'm not going to talk about that because It's the most surreal that the book gets, and so I'll leave it in case anyone wants to read it because it is
Enticing. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely a very interesting part of the book that really kind of pulls everything together, which is kind of the purpose of it. Whoops. I don't know if you heard that. I kicked my trash can.
Okay.
But yeah. So you said it. Hermina is kind of a stand-in for Herman Hesse in a way. Harry is also a part of Herman Hesse. Harry is this old, like, super intellectual guy who feels bad about indulging in like lower enjoyment forms of enjoyment, basically. And Herman Hesse seems to be writing in his, I believe he's in his old age at this point. He's starting to get older. Herman Hesse is starting to get older, and he's writing about an old man who is kind of ultimately like really set in his ways, right? And I think I read something before I started reading the book that was essentially, it might have been in the preface, honestly. I cannot remember where I found this. But it was something about like how this is really about like intergenerational relationships in a way, part of it. A part of it is that Harry is an old man who loves his Wagner and his like Mozart and all these old composers, and we're starting to get into like the jazz age. Even in Germany, like jazz has come to Germany, and I believe I know Hess liked jazz. And he's kind of set in his ways, and he does not he's trying to be high-minded and spiritual, but it's like depressing. It's bringing him down. He's not really living because he's trying to get to this like higher plane that in the book they call them like the immortals, where the immortals live, the people who have really
like Nirvana.
achieved something, who have become
Ethereal,
all the great basically like
Achieving
I think
Nirvana.
I think it means it very literally, like all the great people go to this place
Okay.
after death. They all like kind of get together. And that's just seems like yeah. It's Harry Holler. I knew I was getting his name wrong. I just looked up and saw him in the notes. It's Harry Holler. I think I was saying Heller before.
Oh.
Okay. Well, anyways, yeah. So it's altogether a really interesting read, especially if you do look at it from the perspective of like, getting older and being part of the like older generation and all that. Because I believe I don't remember if they ever bring up the exact ages, but it does seem like all of the people who he interacts with and the people who, by engaging in their part of the culture, that's what brings him new life. It does seem like those, if I'm not mistaken, those people are all quite a bit younger than he is. And so he's kind of like, I keep saying stuck in his ways, but like, there's a certain aspect of like being stuck in an older culture that has gone by, it's over. Henry, the culture that Henry Heller loves and would love to be a part of is gone by and large. And so there's this kind of like message about not getting so stuck in that and engaging in what's going on now. As well as a message about, just the importance of, I guess, like openness as you get older, and then also kind of an acceptance. There's a lot of, Herman Hesse loves spirituality, so of course
Yeah,
that's
you could tell.
part of the message as well.
Siddhartha, essentially, was just like that. His spirituality stuff was like almost into a philosophy novel. But what I wanted to ask you was that did he write? When did he write that? Was that right before that very unfortunate party took over Germany? Because I really hope it was like, man, we got to go learn our ways and accept the culture.
No, it was 1927.
Oh,
So
very
still
disillusioned
still
about.
Weimar days, and he was already living in Switzerland at that point.
Okay,
Um, I believe the Weimar Republic was still together.
yeah,
It's still together until the early to mid 30s. So maybe he is tuned in to what's going on over there, but it's not. I don't think this book is about that at all.
okay,
Um,
good.
yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with that. Um, I would like to read that other book that he wrote during the rise and reign of the Nazis, the Glass Bead Game. After reading this and Siddhartha, I am interested in reading more Hess. But Glass Bead Game specifically because it obviously deals with that subject matter so much or
Oh,
somewhat, I would guess. Um,
it was.
I'm intrigued.
Yeah, no, I'm intrigued. I mean, yeah, it was begun in 1931 in Switzerland, where it was published in 1943 after being rejected for publication in Germany due to Hesse's anti-fascist views. So it's a novel that was 10 years in the making, really.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh, also won the Nobel Prize. So even more reason. We should look at that. Yeah, what he describes is very interesting. I really did like Siddhartha.
Mhm.
It was very philosophical, and I don't know. I do like philosophy novels. Maybe I'm not so well attuned to like really picking apart the philosophical arguments, but spirituality that gets me going.
Yeah,
Especially that's
I
that kind of instruction how to live your life. You're saying.
mhm. I will say I think Siddhartha was better than this book. Siddhartha is a wonderful. I mean, it's 100 something pages. It goes by so fast, and it's
It's a
like
novella, basically.
a perfect little 100 page book that just runs you through kind of Hesse's philosophy on life in general. Um, and Steppenwolf is not as good as that. It's still very good. It's very well
Hmm.
written, but it's not. I would say like it's maybe it's something with the pacing because like obviously I read Siddhartha first and Siddhartha's 100 pages and it just like goes because it's 100 pages. He's got to
Hmm.
get through it. Um, Steppenwolf, especially in the beginning, plods along a little bit, and I know why. I understand why. I understand why, especially in the beginning, I felt that way.
Hmm.
Because obviously he's living a terrible life. He hates it. He's going to
Yeah.
commit suicide.
Oh.
But so that might be why, but it's just not. It's not as that part of it is not as enjoyable to read. Even though I think Steppenwolf overall is still enjoyable to read.
Yeah.
I just mean like it's probably a step down from Siddhartha.
Interesting. I don't have anything else to add, but that was a very good summary. I am very interested in reading more Herman Hesse. Um, Obviously, there's a lot of stuff in my TBR, a lot of stuff. You know how big that list is. But
Yeah.
like, how long is that book? It's
It's
very.
not terribly long. I don't actually don't have the.
Oh, it's
I usually
237 pages.
yeah, it's under 250. So
Yeah, very awesome. So, yeah, that's a very, very, very enlightening book, I guess. But on the flip side, the picture of Dorian Gray.
yo, that's a Freudian slip if I've ever heard one.
Spoiler alert. Well, see, I was trying so hard not to say the portrait of Dorian Gray, but if it's the picture of Dorian Gray. I read this book cover to cover, thinking, "Oh yeah, it's portrait, because portrait makes more sense because it's an actual portrait, not a picture. Well, it is technically a picture, but not the way that we use picture now.
Well, yeah, so what I will say is that at this time there wasn't that other type of picture. So
Yeah,
picture was just another word for painting, basically.
yeah. So, well, that's kind of an anachronism on my part. Sorry. Um, yeah. Oscar Wilde, or in his full name, Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde. It's Irish. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, he was a literary genius. His father was a surgeon, and his mother was basically this very, very tall. I only know her because she's a very tall woman. She's like 6 foot something. She, I don't know why that's the only thing I know about her, but she was also very well known in her field. I think she was a poet or something. And yeah, basically, Wilde went to Oxford. He was and studied the classics, I believe, and just basically was very rambunctious but very studious. Um, People really did know him for his gifts in writing, and he was very funny. But also, he indulged a lot in debauchery, or as they like to call it, something. Some rumors kind of floated around that he was not the straightest crying in the box, and he I don't wanna say that he's defined by sexuality, but he did write about it a lot, and he wrote about his endeavors with other men, that were not very well accepted in Britain at the time. It was very risky for him to do that, but, it was just part of the kind of the allure of, just, like, what Weld put on. Um, he was very, I wouldn't say flamboyant, but, like, he wasn't an introvert, I'll tell you that. He was known for some really great plays, that I have not read. I'm interested in reading them, but, my high school did a production of The Importance of Being Earnest, and it's been, like, a meme of, like, how very unenthusiastic everyone was about that play, so I don't know how much I want to read it right now, but, after reading, a little bit of Oscar Wilde, I'm more inclined to and kinda let that fall by the wayside. And a lot of his works prior to the picture of Dorian Gray kind of satirized high class society and basically was kind of poking fun of it. But he also was an advocate for art's sake, which is basically just saying that art should just exist to entertain, not basically have a push an agenda or anything like that. So this all came to a head when he published probably the only novel that he's ever written, The Picture of Dorian Gray, which we'll get into later, but basically it was very, very scandalous in the fact that it very almost prominently and almost explicitly featured a romance between a man or really an ardent admirer of the eponymous character. It's very explicit, wouldn't you say, Pierce?
It it was so it is. But what I will say is that the editor took I want to
Yes,
say 500 words
500 words out.
of it being so explicit out of the
Yeah,
original publication.
yeah, but even then, it was still
Even then it was
explicit.
still yes,
Yeah,
because it's hard to take away, like, even when I was not reading the explicit, like, oh, there's some kind of romance going on, it was still um it's still I don't actually know how else to put this besides it still felt very gay the way
there's a
that
very
they,
undercurrent.
like,
Yeah,
yeah, the way that they, interacted with each other. um yeah, it just did. So, like,
yeah.
I don't think you can take enough words out
Unless
to
he
stop
rewrote it
it feeling
completely.
like that. Yeah.
And here's the thing that Wilde knew that like he expected backlash, and he knew that he basically wanted to give the middle finger to society at the time for basically just suppressing homosexuality. So he went out and did this, and critics were basically just very quick to like charge him with immorality, and um, basically just looking at one Basil, the male character that really is fond of Dorian's look, Dorian Gray's looks and his beauty and all that. Um, and basically, this caused a scandal. He basically became persona non grata among his friend group. A lot of his old friends. There were some that were stood by his side, but basically, it just shattered. everything that was just close to him. He was censored in the papers and basically just made out to be just not someone that anyone wanted to associate with. And he had a trial over this. I don't know if it was, I should know the details of this trial. I forget what even the trial case was named, but basically it was just him defending his works and his sexuality, and he basically was just like kind of trolling the jury, basically just using a lot of humor. He was just not taking this too seriously. I mean, he did have a good lawyer and everything that did support him, but the jury in Britain at the time, they still found him guilty, and they sent him for hard labor for 2 years, which he described as just something very horrific. Basically, all you would do was 6 hours a day, walk on a treadmill, 1 hour outside, and then go to sleep, and you do that like every day of the week. It was really, really, really bad. I don't know how we've got, no, what was it us? But the prisons in Britain is just, geez. And I don't know, this was before the Reformation period, or when they reformed prisons, but still at the time, it's just punishing people for the sake of punishing people. Um, Very, very bad of you, Britain, to be doing that. No, but after that, he basically was out of prison, but was bankrupt. He stayed in a house. He stayed at the charity of people, but he also indulged in a lot of debauchery. Was basically broke and penniless. And he died almost just alone, of meningitis, I believe. And it was not a slow. It was not a fast death. It was very painful and slow, and he kind of died. A very tragic death that could have really been avoided, if it wasn't because of just him being imprisoned. So, not very happy life, unfortunately, and I mean, it was terrible for something that was just something that he had to suppress, which, ugh. Um, but yeah. So I don't know. Do you have any other comments on his life? Do you know anything else? Do you want to fill in here?
Not really. I suppose I don't know if we made this clear enough. The picture of Dorian Gray is reasonably autobiographical. He put a
Yeah.
lot of himself into at least three characters.
Yes. Actually, there's a
Um,
quote on this. Do you know what the quote is? Um,
no.
so he said, I think in the prelude, he said that Basil Hallward is what I think I am. Lord Henry is what the world thinks of me. Dorian is what I would like to be in other ages, perhaps. So it kind of, I don't know if it's a
Okay, I think I
Freudian
did. I
trio.
think I did.
Yeah,
I think I did read that, but but I do not.
okay,
I didn't remember the actual quote.
yeah. I don't know if it's a Freudian trio, but it's somewhat like that. It's the angel and the devil because Lord Henry, what a jerk he is. But Basil Hallward, a good guy, almost to a fault. And then Doran's kind of in the middle. He has a conscience, but he just listens more to Lord Henry.
Mhm.
So I'm guessing that is just him. Not really a self-insert because I don't think Dorian Gray, the eponymous character, is someone that you want to look up to, but he is quite a character. And I think from here on out, like we said before at the beginning of this podcast, there will be spoilers because this quite literally is kind of impossible to discuss without spoiling. Because even the premise itself, it doesn't
You
even
can guess
happen.
what happens when somebody says the premise to you.
Yeah,
You can kind of guess. Um,
yeah. So, anyways, um, to sum up the story, so basically, it opens up with Lord Dorian. Is he Lord? I don't know. Dorian Gray. He's basically just this affluent guy. He is talking with his friends. I don't Basil. Basil, just a very ardent admirer. He's going, "You're so beautiful. Wow, you're glamorous, glorious, whatever." Which, yeah, Dorian is just described to be this almost impossibly beautiful man, and Lord Henry, I don't know if he's the same age, but like he's basically just like telling him what society is supposed to be like, or what he views society to be like. And basically, Basil just admires Dorian so much that he gives him a painting that is almost immaculate in quality. It is him. It is Dorian Gray's portrait, portrait to a T, and it's just like it's almost impossible that it's this good. And he does some weird Freaky Friday stuff where he goes up to the painting and just in like he admires the painting. He loves it, the painting, because it's so lifelike and so represents him. But he puts it in his attic, I think, and basically just goes like, "Man, if you could just switch places, that'd be great." And it becomes true. I don't know if you've seen Freaky Friday, but like tells you what kind of happens. Or the movie, it's a boy girl thing, which I saw. I was like 7 movies. Um, yeah, so basically, it does come true in a way because he meets this woman named Sybil Vane who he loves, but not really. He loves her acting, and they are about to get married, and then basically, Dorian Gray sees her again at a play of Romeo and Juliet, and for some reason, she's just terrible. So Dorian Gray confronts her, going, "What was that? What was that? That was the worst acting I've ever seen." And Vane's like, "I don't know. I'm just so in love. I don't think I like acting anymore." And Dorian Gray's like, "Nah, we're over." And basically, just leads to her committing suicide or dying by suicide. Unfortunately, this time Dorian Gray starts to feel a bit of guilt, but he looks at the painting. I don't know if he saw the painting first, and then he saw that there. I think it started to get more old and wrinkly, and he looked at himself and was just like, "What? I'm still young and fit and beautiful." Um, and he starts to feel a little bit bad, and he tries to write to her. Oh, well, he doesn't. Yeah, he he realizes that he's dead, and he starts to feel really bad. Tries to make amends, and it just doesn't work out. I believe I'm getting that right. Um, So after that, Dorian Gray just falls into a stupor. He just goes on a tirade about just engaging in all this morally um, bad stuff. He basically just lives a very hedonistic lifestyle, and I like how the book tries to portray it by it being very tedious because it describes all the history about it, and it's very fatiguing. It's very intentionally tiresome to read these sentences because they're very very long. And yeah, and then makes Basil see the portrait, and Basil's like, "Oh my god, what is happening? Why? What is going on?" And Dorian's like, I know, I hate it too." And Dorian stabs Basil. Basically, his moral compass is just gone. Um, and then Dorian is trying to cover this up. He goes to his doctor friend or his chemist friend and tells him, "Hey, man, can you please take care of the body?" And the scientist is like, "No." So then he just blackmails him, and basically it works. But Alan Campbell, the scientist, kills himself out of shame, and now Dorian even goes even further into just like debauchery. He goes to an opium den, and he meets Sybil Vane's brother, who swears vengeance, but basically, it's impossible for Dorian Gray to be, you know, that guy because he's 20 years older or 20 years younger at the time. Or yeah, basically he hasn't aged, and it's impossible for him to be that person. So yeah. Um James Vane just doesn't do anything to him. And but someone does approach James Vane, and yeah, I forget what happens here. Yeah, something happens.
I know he starts to stalk him a little
Yes,
bit,
that's
like
what happens.
basically following this interaction because now he knows who he is.
Yeah.
Somebody tells him like, "Oh yeah, that is Dorian," and he starts stalking him.
Yeah, and I think, like, they're about to start a relationship or something, and then he still feels really bad about it, because he feels like, "I corrupt everyone I meet. I'm so sorry. Oh, no. Woe is me." And he breaks up with her, makes sure that, the woman does not fall in love with him because he doesn't wanna corrupt another person. And now Dorian, at the end, he just goes up to this painting and is like, "I hate you. I want us to trade places," or something like that. And he grabs a knife, I think the one that same one that was used to stab Basil, and stabs the painting. There's a really loud shriek, and once I see it, a lot of people just come up to the source of the sound, and which is the attic, and basically just sees an old decrepit body, but a young, beautiful painting. So what happened there? We don't know, but I think it's obvious that like they either switched places or the body of Dorian Gray just like aged rapidly because after stabbing the painting, the Freaky Friday stuff wears off, and now Yeah, tragedy. Or is it?
Or is it?
Or
No, it
is it?
is.
It is. Um, it is interesting that this is probably Oscar Wilde's like almost a horror novella because he just wrote primarily comedies at the time. Which I think is really neat. My one criticism is that this is a good book. This is a good book, and we'll get into the literary analysis and all that stuff later. But man, the pacing is just off because it's like the first it's not a very long novel. It's like what is it like I forget how long it was. It wasn't very long at all. It's
Isn't it
like
200 pages?
just about,
I don't have it
maybe a
in
little bit
front of me.
less. Yeah. It's very short, but the fact that, it spends, like, the first, like, 4 or 5 chapters just, like, going on these philosophical dirges about life, I'm like, "Alright." I mean, it's well written, but, you can kinda speed up the pace just a little bit, and, I don't know. I don't wanna say because I was looking at the chapters that were removed, the original, the 1891 version, or I think even the 1890 version, I don't know. Um, it was only 100 pages, and I think it was like only chapters like 1 through 13. And the version we have now, like in 2011, I think it's like 1 through 20, something like that. So
Mhm.
I don't want to say that the censorship helped with the pacing, but like a lot of it, a lot of it was just like, wow, we're just like sitting around watching people speak. I mean, it's well written, but at the same time, I don't know. I don't know. You see what I mean in a way, right? You kind of
Yeah.
see where I'm coming
So
from.
you know, I don't I totally get you. I don't know that that the censorship was necessarily taking out the right things, but
Yeah,
I
it
do
wasn't probably not.
understand what you're saying. It probably left in a lot of the philosophical
Yeah,
conversation. That's
it took out the
probably
right.
all it
Yeah,
was. Yeah. Um so yeah, I do think it's interesting that called you called what's his name? Lord Henry a devil because
yeah.
he probably is literally supposed to be the devil
Be the
and
corruptor.
yeah, the corrupter, the corrupting figure who entices young Dorian into a pact and does not, maybe not literally supposed to be a devil, but he definitely does not realize or does not care what effect it's having on young
Yeah,
young Mr. Gray.
unfortunate. Yeah, and I think he kind of gets off scot free as well. This is definitely like a critique on again high society. I don't know if Lord Henry is supposed to represent the average Joe in high society, but definitely doesn't paint a flattering picture. If like you know the a lot of the not many of the characters get development besides those three people, and he's like he doesn't take up the most time, but like he does take up a significant amount of time. And he's just like he's absolutely the worst. I think he's a misogynist, right? I think he's just basically a bigot. Um, he I think encourages Dorian Gray to just like not feel anything after Sybil Vane kind of passes away, um, and a bunch of other stuff. Not a good man is
Just
basically what I'm saying.
indulge, forget about
Indulge,
her.
forget about it, forget about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, he's just indifferent and doesn't help anything. But yeah. So you can definitely see a bit of Wilde's own life. Again, that opening quote is just kind of sums up those three characters: the id, the ego, the superego. I want to say. Um, but also, he is also quoted in saying, as in every first novel, the hero is the author is the author as Christ or Faust. Um, so what do you think of that little quote over there? Who's Christ and who's Faust? Um, because every first writer or every writer that puts out their first book, usually, not all the time, will put their protagonist as either Christ-like or just the devil, essentially. Um, so I like to think that Dorian Gray is essentially just kind of like Faust. He makes a Faustian bargain, you know, a Faustian deal. Kind of doesn't with the painting, and it doesn't not go well because he just he doesn't like being the ageless beauty because there are no
Mhm.
consequences to anything. Um, yeah. So that's my interpretation of that
Mhm.
little quote. Um, and there are a bunch of other stuff too, like Shakespeare. We've kind of tiptoed around Shakespeare because I don't know. Piers isn't very enthusiastic about it. I do like Shakespeare, but I'm not like a Shakespearean scholar or anything. But yeah, it's English literature, so it's gonna influence that. Apparently, it's a character from The Tempest.
So, what I would say is that given the quote that we brought up before, Lord
Christ.
Henry, what the world thinks of me, he said, Lord Henry, what the world thinks of me. I would say Lord Henry is also supposed to be a critique of um, what society in general thinks of gay people, the like monster
Oh, okay.
that they make out of gay men, because he's he's a immoral indulger in frivolous um frivolous temptations. um in fact, he, the only way to get rid of a temptation is to yield to it, resist it, and your soul grows sick with longing. I mean, come on.
Yeah, that
What
is.
what kind of temptations do we think we're talking about here? I know there's a specific one in the book, but I
Yeah,
mean, if he really did say like Lord Henry is what society thinks people like me are, what
yeah,
what more is there to say about it? You know what I mean? It's a
yeah.
critique of what of society as much as it's a
Kind of
critique
like a parody of
of
it, right? Yeah.
yeah. It's a critique of society as much as it is also a critique of nobility and high society.
Yeah, I will also say that this book is actually really well written. There are lots of really
Mm.
great quotes in here. I don't want to say all of them, but like, what's a good one? Because like the the books. Oh yeah, there's that one passage where he's just like looking at the books, and it goes on forever. But it's like it's interesting. The books that the world calls immoral are books that show the world its own shame. Um, which is actually this actually relates to a quote that he said before. Again, he was a big proponent of arts for art's sake. And one of the quotes that he likes to say is, "There is no such thing as a moral or an immoral book. Books are well written or badly written. That is all." This is something that he liked to. I think he said as in the preface, which in the preface. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Um, he wrote a bit of it. I wish I had a copy. I had a copy on Kindle, but like I've seen people discuss it. Because again, he knew that this book would be spring loaded with a bunch of criticisms lobbied against it, purported as just like this immoral, indecent book. That was one of the quotes that make sure that, like, man, you're projecting a bunch of knowledge onto, or your interpretation onto this book, which I didn't intend to have. So that's on you. Um, so I'm guessing he's pulling an old Hemingway and The Old Man of the Sea, where he's like, there's no symbolism. It's just the guy in the boat looking for fish or a fish. So
Hmm.
um, I don't know if this is like just like an absolute defense or he actually does mean this. I like to think this is kind of defense because, man, there's some immoral books out there. One specifically about a German guy or an Austrian guy that kind of wants to make Germany great again. That's kind of an immoral book right there. Yeah, or the Turner Diaries. Yeah, there are some things as immoral books, but I don't know. That's kind of up. That's we can kind of project my feelings about this book onto the picture of Dorian Gray, but at the end of the day, I think it was still like pretty good read. It was carried by its prose a lot. Like, I really liked how it was written, and, like, even when they were talking a lot, you could tell that he was a poet because even the dialogue was full of prose, but it was in a way that was kinda approached naturalistically. Like, these are the way that people would speak in a way that's a little bit heightened, but you can kinda see the flow of each sentence. It's great. Um, I just kinda wish that, 1, he did kinda tighten up the writing a little bit, or the pacing, I mean, and, I mean, that's about it. I don't know. It's a very simple book. And I'm not asking like a plot twist to happen at the end. Like, yeah, the secret to abolishing this painting was true love or something. I don't know. It's just a very simple morality play. And it's supposed to not tell you what to think, but it kind of does take a side.
Yeah.
That's me.
Zero consequences equals bad. Is yeah.
Yeah.
I
Um.
what I don't know what's to be said about this book that hasn't been said already. Especially like it's very popular amongst readers our age. I know. So
Yeah. It's
it's one of Book Talk's favorite classics.
because it's
So
so short. Probably.
I think partially because it's very gay.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
that'll happen too. It's
yeah,
very flagrant in
yeah.
sexuality. Yeah.
hmm
I don't have
But
anything else to say.
yeah, it's a good book. I recommend both books that we went over today because I've actually read both of them.
Yes.
It's a nice
Well,
philosophical.
nice. Oh wait, are you talking about
Yeah,
my book?
yeah, I am.
Okay, nice. That's the word we'll use.
It's
Okay.
the picture of Dorian Gray is a nice kind of philosophical pondering about
Hmm.
its subject matter. Whereas Siddhartha or not Siddhartha, Steppenwolfe by Herman Hesse is this kind of existentialist, surrealist, like how to live as you age kind of thing. Um, both very interesting. They both have something to say about how people should live, I
Hmm.
guess. Not necessarily Dorian Gray, not so much how you should
You
act, but more
yeah.
just like how, life should function, I guess.
Yeah.
Um yeah, recommend it. Good
Recommend.
books.
And yeah, we should not exile artists for their art, by the way. I don't know if we
Yes,
kind of made that clear.
absolutely not. Um all right. Well, I guess on that note, you can find us on Twitter and TikTok at not just any pod. Um Yeah, we post stuff a lot on there. You can find information on our our show as well as some memes and other videos. I talk about movies in the TikTok.
Yeah, which is very
Um,
ironic.
yeah. Well, movies are like 40 to 45% of our show because Bookends is like a
Yeah.
movie 90% of the time.
Well, actually, we could
Um,
be talking about a TV show soon. Just saying.
that's true. Speaking of that, next month is Apocalyptic Fiction Month. So, you know, put on your tinfoil hats, crawl in your bunkers, and wait, 31 days, and we'll be right with you.
If you download this
Um,
episode, you can listen to it during the apocalypse because we're also available
yeah,
on all podcasting platforms and on YouTube if you are so
yes,
visually inclined to watch us.
yeah. So tune in next month also for post apocalypse. We're gonna be talking about The Last of Us for bookends.
Yes. So
That
if you're not watching that, either play the game, the first game. We're talking about the first game or the
yeah.
first season of the show.
We're
Which,
saving the second game for an unnamed future date. We're not getting into that controversy just yet.
but just too late.
Um, yeah, but yeah, and then I'm going to be telling Justin how wrong he is about the road. That's what I'm reading.
Yeah, he is reading.
Um,
He is reading the road. So
so you can tune in for that. And on that note,
goodbye, Prometheus. Exiled, but not really.
okay, all right.
Okay.